And I do want to talk a little bit really quickly as these players are getting shuffled up. Theo looking confident again, like you mentioned, Gruel prowess on the play, has to like his chances there. These players seem to like Standard. I mean, I've heard quite a bit about how the opinions on Standard are quite high. Everyone's really excited about it, but overall, kind of one of the newer formats. A lot of Eternal format Magic played here on the NRG series, and all these players choosing Standard quite interesting to me. As we are going to go ahead and kick things off. The turn one Hired Claw is going to be the one drop there for Theo. Follow up here very quickly. Emberheart Challenger getting the beatdowns right away. I mean, the kind of start you want to see. It's the prowess deck. You need your one, your two, and then spells in hand is the ideal. Kanfer's gonna need a response here from the Zur domain deck. Imagine not a lot to do though. As here comes up the beanstalk. What impacts the board? What are we looking to do early to stop the Gruel prowess beatdowns?
Yeah, so the Zur deck has a decent amount of interaction and can play a control game, but the Zur deck, Drake has what I call its Exodia draw, where it goes Beans, Green Overlord into Zur, and that draw beats basically every deck in Standard, minus Theo's actual best draws, which we haven't had here. We have a great draw, but not our best. So that, if you're a Harrison fan, is what we're looking for here as Theo jams in for more damage. But overall, Theo's feeling pretty good about this in game number one, especially on the play.
Oh, whoa. All creatures, double Heartfire heroes, join the Monastery Swiftspear. It's all creatures, no spells. Maybe not the draw that Theo necessarily wants to see. You mentioned like kind of a god draw, and the creatures, of course, getting in with nothing in board to block right now as Cavern of Souls added to the mix. I think that it's going to be a good draw up until exactly where there's a blocker. And here is, you mentioned the Exodia draw. This is piece one, Overlord of the Hauntwoods. Mm-hmm. We got a birthday balloon in the background. Apparently, it is Dom's birthday. Happy birthday, Dom. That, in case you see the balloon there, that's a little bit of extra fun that comes with it.
Yeah, I mean, so Theo has a Burst Lightning in hand and the ability to level up Hired Claw. So there is an extra 3 damage what's on board here. Oh, and we choose the talent, Drake. I think Theo has exact lethal.
Is that, yeah, I think we just saw him count there. That's exact lethal. Whoa! That's turn 4, right? Turn 4 kill on the play. Oops. Yeah. Exodia draw if you had it, not good enough, just dead.
Yeah, and
2-minute game.
Yeah, this is a 2-minute game there. Theo showing, like how powerful this deck can be on the play, and also why a lot of players think this is one of the best decks in Standard, right? A lot of our players this weekend brought Dimir, right? Which is clearly a big sign they think it's great. A big advantage of Dimir is it doesn't have any matchup it's truly dead in. And you can kind of target these Gruel decks, maybe with stuff like, the mono-white control deck, but it's hard to beat the rest of the field, right? Theo said, hey, I'm great. I can do this. This deck runs people over. Let's play it. And it grinds better than most of the control decks do. So, Theo's showing why this deck is so great here.
Running people over is what he did. We'll see if Harrison can do anything about it. Let's take a quick look at his take on Zur domain, particularly what he has available on the sideboard. So we got 3 copies of Authority of the Councils, 1 copy of Elspeth's Smite, 1 copy of Nissa Ascended Animist, 2 Not on My Watch, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Terra Sunder, 2 Tranquil Frillback, and then 2 Vivian Reed. What do you like here against the Gruel prowess deck?
So I love the Not on My Watch. That's a great card in this matchup. Just going to be able to exile an attacking creature. That's important. Elspeth's Smite doesn't always get it, but basically does. And our deck has a lot of tap lands, and we have a lot of mana commitment, so the 1-mana answer is definitely nice here. And then Authority of the Councils is the last card I'm really eyeballing in this position. It's something where, if you have those creature-heavy draws, it can mitigate your little life total, and the haste matters a lot in these sort of spots. So getting a little incidental life gain can come up pretty huge ways. And late game, your Zur can turn it into like a 1/1 life-linking Death Touch, which isn't the best, but does block, and can matter in these sort of spots. So we're going to see that, and we're probably going to see a lot of trimming of the top end here from the Zur deck. But I have seen some players will know on the play keep a bit more of it and try and curve out aggressively. I'm curious to see how Wesley wants to approach it in game number 2. Or
yeah, I definitely like that. And of course, as you mentioned, Zur getting lifelink, a big part of the equation in the main deck games, and still could be a player in the sideboard games, even with all the sideboard help that we seem to have available. So that's pretty straightforward. With that, let's go ahead and take a look at Theo. And I don't know that he needs any help, but we'll see if he has any nonetheless. We take a look at his sideboard. We have 2 copies of Lithomantic Barrage. We have 3 copies of Paw Patch Formation, 4 copies of Questing Druid, 2 Scorching Shot, and 4 copies of Torch the Tower. Much less total cards in the sideboard. What do you like here against the Domain deck?
Yeah, Paw Patch Formation is sort of like the Doomblade equivalent in this matchup, destroying creature with flying or enchantment, right? And the Zur is how a lot of this power comes from, right? Like giving the lifelink and the death touch is really important. So you can use Paw Patch as a way to blow up the Overlord you might be trying to activate on, or blow up the Zur proper if maybe your opponent's making an attack that looks really good, making them lose lifelink. I like that sort of card. Some players bring in a lot of questing druids when the games get grindier. So maybe Theo thinks, as he's looking at the sideboard, that the games are going to have a lot more interaction. So he might want some of those questing druids. I've seen some players really like them in these matchups. Some have not liked it as much. Kind of matters in your opinion there. In a very similar vein, Lithomantic Barrage can be a card that I see some players really like here for its ability to fight over Zur in particular. So I'm a little interested to see how exactly how Theo wants to play it with being on the draw. I could see maybe taking a slightly slower approach. And then if we get to a game 3, Theo might trim some of that fat and just try to be lean, mean fighting machine again.
True. And there you have it. These players getting shuffled up and have done some sideboarding themselves. And I mean, quick game 1. I imagine that Theo obviously looking to do so again here in game 2. But with Harrison on the play, the Exodia God Draw you mentioned is now available. And we didn't even talk about cards like Sunfall. We got 2 copies of those in the main deck. For Harrison, way too slow in game 1. Maybe now a little bit of a better chance to be a player in game 2. And maybe some cause to take a look at the creature column if you're Theo. Not sure how much of that you really even care about. I don't know. Theo just being on the play with Girl Prowess, even if you take a loss on this one, you get another game on the play, has to like his spot. But I mean, again, at the end of the day, these players both kind of collaboratively chose this format. Bear in mind, Harrison did ban Pioneer, and Theo, of course, chose Standard from among the remaining formats. So no matter what, at the end of this, kind of for better or for worse, however way it goes, the players kind of have to look back and say, did I make the right choice? And yeah, I imagine the loser is going to be doing more of that thinking than the winners, as Theo just take a quick mulligan.
Yeah, so when Harrison was presenting his deck to Theo, I saw a Tranquil Frillback in the deck. So Harrison's decided to bring that in as well as maybe a little way to life gain. And Drake has Authority of the Consuls in his hand. One of the things about the Zur deck is you have to play a lot of the Surveillance to sort of make your mana work. So having it early, if we have an untapped white source, is going to be great, but at least we'll have it for turn 2. So maybe we go like tap land, something like that.
And it's not a 0 with Zur, right? Like if you're talking about just this like 1/1 enchantment, it still has Death Touch, right? So like you could still get involved in late in the game when the tapping stuff doesn't matter as much anymore. It can be like a real blocker. And I think that's really attractive. I think that's why we see Harrison go so hard on the authorities. We're going to start things off with the Surveil Zur to the graveyard.
I think Harrison kept a 1 lander.
Need to find a land. Heartfire Hero in play. Found a land. All right.
Yeah, he kept a 1 land double Authority of the Council. I'm pretty positive and has it.
And I think Theo probably can sniff that out based on the Zur as we do go back to a very quick turn 2. And it's Innkeeper's Talent. Gonna grow the hero. You look at Authority of the Councils, reprinted in Foundations, originally from the Avishkar set, I guess. Creatures your opponent's control enter tapped. So future creatures get enter tapped and kind of get a little bit of the Soul Warden effect. Whenever a creature an opponent controls enters, you get a life. 2 life, because we got 2 of them. They actually stack.
Very big here. And Theo having this talent is a big draw. Not only is it giving him a lot of pressure right now without sort of, giving a little bit of life to Harrison, it's triggering this Valiant for 0 mana. And if we have a mana laying around, we can start giving our thing Ward 1. And you're seeing Harrison have to pull the trigger on this because the Ward 1's 2 backbreaking with his 2 land hand full of kill spells here in Beans.
Right. Yeah. Going to take care of that one right away. Future creatures now going to come in tapped. And Theo, still has the powerful Innkeeper's Talent, like you mentioned, still good enough on its own. This card, I think, a huge player for these decks. 3rd land added to the mix. I believe a Copperline Vorge there deployed. We're going to have a 3 mana play. It looks like Screaming Nemesis enters tapped. Usually enters tapped because it has haste. Nope. Authority of the Council is going to mean that one enters tapped.
Yeah, that is a really good draw for Theo. So Theo, it's just a very powerful card and lets him use all his mana on this turn, which is nice. But also, if we have something like Burst Lightning and we're able to target this, that's going to undo the Authority gaining that incidental life. And sometimes that life is literally make or break in this sort of matchup when you're trying to resolve these bigger cards and have these huge swing turns.
Yeah, and Harrison, deploys up the Beanstalk, draws a card, but still no blockers on his side of the board as we do go back to Theo. Tapping the Rock Face Village. Gonna do some mapping. Doesn't like what he sees.
Yeah, Theo brought in the Questing Druids and has Snakeskin Veil and Paw Patch in hand. So it's a very reactive hand, which is actually great given how this game is playing out right now with the double authority, right? If we had one of our very heavy creature draws like we had in game number 1, then we would be in a very awkward position here of sort of like giving life and not being able to really fight back here. But we just get to level up our talent and beat in.
Yeah, level up the talent, and we get a counter from the map as well. So now a huge threat is this Screaming Nemesis as it crashes across for 6, starting to undo some of the life gain. Harrison, maybe still having some land trouble, maybe not. Looks like he might have found one. That's Cavern of Souls. Okay. So we found land 4. We did bin a Zur early. If we have another one that could be a solid blocker, still feels a little slow. You mentioned Frillback.
Yeah.
Not sure what we have access to necessarily. Doesn't seem to have a path that he's likes to snap off. A lot of shaking of the head there.
Yeah, sort of 2 decision trees in hand. We have Green Overlord and White Overlord, but we also have Leyline Binding. So if we play the Green Overlord, we can Binding. But if Theo has something like Paw Patch Formation, he can blow it up in response. Or, has Snakeskin Veil, it'd be devastating. White Overlord, if we have Monstrous Rage, we're just going to die. And we can't even really block, because if we block, we're still going to take damage and then make it so we can't gain life. So Harrison in a really tricky position right now. Decides to go with the Green Overlord, though.
Yeah, I mean, Green Overlord obviously fixes the mana problems, has some of the highest upside. I mean, the permanents have Ward 1, right? So are we able to really make any moves here? Is Questing Druid here is going to seek the beast on Instep, and instant speed spell is that one. Thinking about responding.
Yeah, I think Harrison's going to fight over the talent.
Okay. And that'll remove some of the pressure. And of course, we'll also remove Ward 1.
Yeah.
And now the Screaming Nemesis, still massive, but Harrison has a little bit of life to work with. But you mentioned there are draws here that are just lethal.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're attacking Harrison down to 4, right? Like that in of itself is pretty worrisome. And, Theo could even do something like, if we wanted to, we could Paw Patch Formation to get back our talent and do that sort of thing too. Has a lot of cards available to us thanks to the Questing Druid. And, this is why you see a lot of players still play this Gruul deck despite Dimir being so attractive. It has so much strength, right, in curving out, but also we have a lot of card advantage to play these longer, grindier games despite being, a 1-2-3 deck.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned this deck being well set up to grind. And, with the multiple copies of Authority of the Councils, that seems like it would stop early draws. And really, I mean, Harrison doesn't gain that much life off of those. It's really just been the Screaming Nemesis.
Yeah.
So as we're kind of thinking through this turn, can't imagine we have lethal. I think Theo would have snapped that off very quickly. So here comes the attack for 6. No map activation. Just going to deploy a tapped challenger. Okay. Readjusting the mana a little bit. So that is going to give Harrison some of the life back. 3 mana up's a lot. Choosing not to deploy the Druid as well. That one's going to stay on an adventure as we go back to Harrison.
Yeah, Theo representing Paw Patch Formation and Snakeskin Veil here and has them both.
A lot of tricks available, as you would expect. I mean, the prowess decks kind of reminiscent of the Infect stuff, I think kind of came before it, but prowess these days is more the manifestation of the combat creatures plus tricks. Kind of have to figure out what tricks you can beat, which ones you can't. Here is the White Overlord of the Mistmoors.
Yeah, I do love that Infect comparison. I know you and I played a lot of Modern during that time where this was a thing. And it's sort of like, imagine if your Infect deck also could grind. It was like not bad against Jund. And that is what this Gruul deck is like.
Yeah, it's just so much more powerful than Infect ever really was. Here we go. We do have the impending Overlord of the Mistmoors going to go ahead and make 2/1 insect tokens with flying. So we got some blockers. No trample here yet. Course, yet being the key word. I think a Monstrous Rage more or less at any point would have spelled very bad news for Harrison.
Yeah, I also wonder if Theo maybe cut. I know some players like to cut those when they're on the draw for these grindier cards like we talked about. So I am curious. I know some people will always leave in the first one because it is just very powerful. And that is a big card Theo is drawing to if it is in his deck, as it would just mean lethal.
Yeah. Maybe also, you see this sometimes with like lightning bolts back in the day. In some of the Eternal formats, you'd cut some, but leave some in because there's just times where drawing one is good, especially when the game goes long. Different context, obviously, because lightning bolt is just reach, but that kind of represents a lot of reach just with trample. It mixes up the conversation a little bit. So maybe he trims some, not all, leaves one. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's also a lot of advantages just having something that targets your creatures in this deck, right? Like with the Challenger here, it's just a redraw card, right? It's like Giant Growth that draws a card. So Theo moving very quickly, though.
Yeah, found land 6, which I don't know how often you actually want land 6, but I mean, you mentioned this deck can grind, and mana to grind is nice. Innkeeper's Talent going to be found. So looks like we are reaching for the Paw Patch.
Destroying the Moth. It is a flying creature.
yeah, it is like it's also enchantment. It's got all these things that you can pick it off. They're enchantments, right? Checking.
Yeah, well, they're not enchantments. I don't think those ones.
They're not enchantments. The Overlord itself is an enchantment. There is, oh my gosh, get lost. He has a Snakeskin Veil, and that's it. A 2-0 sweep. Theo fells Harrison Kanfer. Gruul Prowess over Zur Domain. I mean, you talked about it at the top of this match. The deck just kind of runs people over, and I mean, they played 6 turns there, but that still feels like you ran them over. I mean, I don't know how long that took, but wow, aggressive, grindy, destructive, incredible.
Yeah, I mean, you can say all those things about Theo as well, as he, has just dominated this tournament. Harrison putting up a great run, making top 8 is no easy feat. But it does really show, like, this Gruul deck is sort of like the deck when it comes to standard, at least in my personal opinion. And if not, it's like the second best, right? Demir's like the other deck that's kind of vying for that spot. And we saw there why this is a deck that, is putting up good numbers and is something to really be considering.
Yeah, and of course, we're going to be seeing more of that as Theo does advance to our top 4, and Kanfer a solid run, but felled by kind of the menace here. Of course, Theo was the one that Garrick chose to dodge the MVP power. But as you would kind of anticipate, the quick result there means that we can get to our backup match even faster. So let's go ahead and head down there. The only other player to find 8 wins prematurely in our stage 1, and that is Dominic Harvey facing off here against Wesley Hickman. We're here in game 1, as you can see, and with Dom being number 2 seed, he's on the play, has 2 lands, and of course he's playing Dimir midrange versus Temur Floodcaller. Very different context from what we just saw.
Yep. Dom also, has the birthday buff going on, like we mentioned before.
Broken
behind him. Yeah, and when players like Dom get to be in the top 8 during the birthday buff, it does feel like a competitive advantage.
It definitely is. There's not close. Here is an in-step fairy mastermind, I believe, going to get eaten by a torch to the tower from Wesley very quickly. Dom's going to go into his turn 3. Presumably some of that to stop some potential ninjutsu shenanigans.
Yeah, you want to fight over these early creatures from the Dimir deck because a lot of their big payoffs involve you having other creatures on the board, right? Enduring Curiosity, Kaito, you need to have friends along the way. So just picking them apart can go a long way.
Definitely Wesley prioritized that. No thought about it, as there was some thought there about the up the beanstalk. Dominic ultimately choosing that one needs to be spell stuttered. And so here we go. Back to Dom turn 4. Does not have a land, does have a Spyglass Siren. Maybe has a land hanging out. Nope, does not.
And this is a big sign to Wesley here, right? If you're not cracking this map when you're missing your land drops, clearly you have something you want to be doing.
Yeah, more tricks. And this time, spell stutter not necessarily going to eat this up the beanstalk. Draws a card and another creature on end step. So you mentioned, Dom building up a board here. Some of the payoffs of this Dimir midrange deck do require you to have a board, and Dom now kind of does. No blockers for Wesley, as we are here. Dom still only 3 mana, but has had a lot to do with it. Beatdowns. And there's the Kaito Ninjutsu, a card I've been very impressed with. Kaito Bane of Nightmares. This one gets to be a creature on your turn. That's a 3/4. It has hexproof as well. So a little bit more damage than it looked like initially. Total of 5. Pretty big hit, provided it all works. Looks like it will not. Because this town ain't big enough for the both of them. So we are going to go ahead and return up to 2 target online permanents to their owner's hand. Of course, it only gets that reduction if you target your own thing, but with Up the Beanstalk, you're fine picking that one back up. I'll draw another card. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting to me too, because that's a card that Wesley could have used on the Kaito on our own turn. So Wesley might have like another one or something that we feel can cover the Kaito. Potentially also, we're really looking for a specific card. So getting the redraw, like you mentioned there, from both this town and the 2 life and replaying the beans might be what's going on here for Wesley.
It also might have just been the only way to be mana efficient on that turn as well, and that's appealing in its own right when you are more or less ostensibly a slower deck. I'd say. I don't know. I'm not 100% confident in that, but I would say I think Dimir midrange is currently at least in the kind of beatdown setup. So we'll see. Wesley really just playing up the beanstalks over and over again, drawing cards, trying to find enough stuff to turn the corner here. As Dom does get to keep the Kaido for the moment. You mentioned kind of there's pressure to get that card off the board. Doesn't look like Wes is going to be able to do that as Enduring Vitality enters the board.
Yeah, Vitality is a part of this combo. If you've seen this Temur Flood Color deck before, you know how powerful that card can be. If you haven't, this deck is basically looking to create a loop with this talent ain't big enough and Storm Chaser's talent. We'll get there when we get there, but know that this Dear Friend is a big part of that puzzle, and it's something Dom is going to be thinking about. If Dom has something like a main deck Annoyance Affliction, it would have been his best draw here as a way to get a huge advantage and remove a problematic card.
And no copies of Annoyant Reflection in the main deck. 2 in the sideboard, though, so we'll be talking about those when it comes sideboard time. Yeah, don't have access to those quite yet. And also not even sure we have access. We did find a 4th land. Okay. I was going to say, we've been really missing land drops the whole time, and for better or for worse, has had plenty of things to do. But Gloom Lake Verge was found. Now maybe we got a few more options. Kaido still in play. Now there's blockers. The equation's getting a little more complex. And, there goes the blocker. We're going to go ahead and stun that one. The -2 tap target creature, put 2 stun counters on it. So it's not going to be doing any blocking anytime soon as Kaido rumbles across for 3 more.
Yep. Also, the Vitality, it represents a mana. So also cutting Wesley off one. And like you talked about, we've been spending a lot of time drawing cards here, right? Wesley has a full hand of cards. So does Dom, but Dom was missing land drops. Wesley has not. So we want to start deploying all these things. And that is one of the big parts of this Flood Caller deck is the ability to multi-spell a lot.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, Dom, we know he's representing the Drowner still from being picked up from this town ain't big enough. But also, I mean, we've seen a spell stutter in his hand for quite some time. And even as Wesley is building up mana, it seems like the card be expiring. But presumably, I mean, Wesley's going to look to spend a lot of mana in a particular turn, and it might find a target kind of in a turn where you wouldn't expect it to. But I mean, very conservative there. Just going to go ahead and pick off the Kaido, deploy nothing else. Go ahead, it's your turn.
Yeah, this might be a spot where Dom, is happy to develop the curiosity, but is thinking about, okay, if Valley Flood Caller comes down, what's going to be happening from here? How am I going to be feeling? There's not a lot of otters on the board, so it won't generate, a ton of mana right away, but will be sort of this, potentially problematic card in the coming turns.
Yep, and another beatdowns, and that's something to consider as well. I mean, each of these kind of flash creatures, still no blockers available for Wesley after that. Vitality got tapped, so his life total is really starting to dwindle under some pressure. Full grip of cards for both players. Dom's card's cheaper, but he also has less to work with, at least at the moment.
And this is a big thing for Dom is we need to keep the pressure up. The Flood Card deck, if we go super long, will just beat us. We can hustle back and forth. We have some interaction. We have some, like, hey, you have to kind of like respect me at these points, but they will beat us. We are an up the beanstalk deck, a Storm Chaser's Talent deck. If we go super duper long, we are sort of typically favored in those spots. So Dom developing these 2 creatures here is a sign of respect in that regard.
Yeah, and there it does actually find a target for the spell stutter there. So that's, I mean, he's been holding that spell up for quite some time as this Vitality is going to have its last stun counter removed. So we're going to see, I mean, like you mentioned, the pressure's really starting to be turned up here. We'll see if Wesley has anything. Just a land. Yavimaya Coast past the turn. Okay.
It's a rough spot. I think we have another Flood Valley Caller, but I think we also just have 2 lands with that. We have a lot of draws that can start going crazy from this position, but we do kind of need to hit them sooner than later.
Yeah, some potentially awkwardness, right? Like, this isn't the Temur Flood Caller deck. When you think about Up the Beanstalk decks, usually you're talking about a deck that has a bunch of spells that trigger Up the Beanstalk. We actually only have 2 copies, and it's really part of this, like, combination setup. A lot of these Valley Flood Callers and stuff don't keep the card advantage running, and I think that I don't know, it's tough here. You'd love for all your spells that are getting countered to be drawing cards. And as your resources begin to diminish and your life total is also starting to diminish, Kaido coming back into play here as a big attack, have to point to that as maybe not as exciting as you would expect Up the Beanstalk to be, especially as you've seen it in other decks.
Yeah.
Crunch down to 2 goes Wesley. And now, I mean, are we just talking about only combo outs?
Dom has Shieldred in hand too.
Oh,
He
that
picked
might
it
be the
up as the
killer.
third card from the curiosity, and I think he's figuring out like, yeah, like if I play this, is there anything that can go wrong? Can you like, unsummon this or kill it maybe with a couple of torch and tower or something like that? Like what can happen here? And I think you're seeing Dom, even though this enduring isn't mattering a ton, he'd rather fight over that card and hold the Shieldred for later, knowing it's gonna be very hard to actually die from this position. All Wesley can really have to do is stabilize. You see Dom tank on it a little.
Yeah, I don't know if this. I don't have a great look at Dom's hand. I don't know if this is a bluff or not. Like if he has actual interaction or not. But I mean, he chose not to play Shieldred, which would signal to me you obviously have other stuff to do with your mana. There's a lot of flash threats in this Dimir deck. The question is, what do we got? We got go for the throat.
And
Fairy Mastermind, Drowner. Okay, yeah, so we can double spell with that 4 mana on the opponent's turn. That's pretty good.
Yeah. And this might be a situation too where Dom's thinking, do I want to Flood Pit Drowner to sort of force an untap here? Do I want to go for the throat and not even deal with that? I think Dom thinks, hey, I've got this game basically locked up. What are the ways I lose? And Dom is someone who's played, I would assume, a lot of the Flood Caller deck. I actually don't know 100%. I talked to Dom about that as preparation for this event, but Standard wasn't something we talked about. And he loves to play those combo decks as he picks up game number 1 here.
Yeah, very little he likes more than weird combo decks, but in this case, kind of straying from the norm and to great success. Our number 2 on the play was able to, despite some land issues early, fell Wesley in game 1. So we're going to have to be doing some sideboarding from Wesley's perspective. Kind of just looked like Dom was in control the entire time, frankly, even though he's missing land drops, theoretically not being able to spend as much mana as Wesley. That's usually what spells trouble. But in Dom's case, I mean, all the spells are powerful and they lined up nicely.
Yep, and Wesley also got a little unfortunate. Like, let's keep a spade, right? We drew a lot of lands there off the up the beanstalk, but Dom did do a good job of making sure, like, hey, with the resources I have, I'm fighting over the things that actually matter. Do I care about this enduring? No, I can just stun this down for a little bit, right? That's not what this game is about.
Absolutely. Well, with that, we're going to have a game 2. But first, we have to take a look at the sideboards. Let's take a look at Wesley Hickman's Teamer Flood Caller deck, and particularly what we have available in the sideboard. In the sideboard, we have 1 copy of Flood Pit's Drowner, 2 copies of Jace Reawakened. We have 1 copy of Lithomantic Barrage, 2 Negates, 2 Paw Patch Formation, 2 Pyroclasm, 1 Questing Druid, 2 Scorching Dragonfire, 1 Song of Totenaz, whatever, 1 Valley Flood Caller. So all that is what we have available to us. What do you like in the Dimir mid-range matchup?
So we talked about it earlier. I know that I really want to fight over the board and try not let them get that early advantage, right? We saw how Kaito and Curiosity can run away with games even when we're having mana issues, right? As long as we get to that 3rd or 4th land, that's kind of all we really need. So I want to interact with those cards. Scorching Dragonfire is something that jumps out to me as like, while it might be a card that you would love to have versus Gruul, I think you also want it here just to make sure Dom doesn't get going too far, and it's something that can help cover a Kaito and exile the Curiosity forever. So I really like that. I could see something like a Pyroclasm for very similar reasons, Barrage, very similar reasons. All those jump out to me. Flood Pit Drowner is a card I actually know that CFT is a big fan of, and I believe for this matchup, sort of lets you play the fair game a bit more. And so bringing this in might be a great way too, because it can sort of be a removal-esque spell, right? You play it, it sort of taps something down. You discount it, it taps something down again. We're trying to buy time and assemble our combo, or Storm Chaser talent the opponent out very much through value.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. Just kind of using it more as a removal spell than as a real tempo card, like you see it from the Dimir mid-range. And that's really the sign of a powerful card, which, of course, Flood Pit Drowner definitely is. So with that, we'll kind of move on to Dominic Harvey's Dimir mid-range deck. Take a look at that and a look at the sideboard there for him as well. So we have 2 copies of Anoint with Affliction, a card you talked about early. We have 1 Blot Out, 1 Cryptic Coat, 1 Duress, 1 Kicks Command, 1 Malicious Eclipse, and we got 2 Negates, 4 Preacher of the Schism, 1 Shieldred the Apocalypse, and 1 Tishana's Tidebinder. Talk to me about what you want against Flood Caller.
Yeah, so I want these Anoints to fight over the Enduring and, the Valley Flood Caller as well. I can see Blot Out as well for a very similar thing, specifically because it exiles, right? That's kind of what I'm wanting those cards for. Beyond that, I can see us going a lot of different directions. Shieldred is a card that's pretty powerful and can sometimes be frustrating for them, but spending 4 mana isn't something that I'm super interested in with things like this town, especially on the draw. So I don't think it's unreasonable to bring it in, but I doubt we'll see Dom bring it in on the draw. I imagine on the play that's more likely to happen here if we have a game number 3. Tishana's Tidebinder, kind of a similar thing here. This is something that can turn off our triggered abilities, so that will turn off Valley Flood Caller. So I'm expecting that to come in here. And I could see little things like Duress, and it really matters on how much non-creature spells Dom thinks are going to be in the deck post board. That's going to have to be a moment where maybe you might not normally do that, but I want to in this situation because it's open deck list and I can see exactly what you're sideboarding.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that is a component here as well. You know, even if you try to get spicy with the sideboarding, at the end of the day, these are all cards that your opponent is aware of that you might have access to. And, you know, even if things go wrong in game 2, you can even make adjustments in game 3. So, yeah, I mean, a little bit more trickery than the straightforward sideboarding you might play, whatever, however you all play Magic, be it on Arena Ladder or at your local game shop, whatever, where, you know, all this information is hidden for the most part. You kind of have to guess it, what the heuristics are to do. Most of the time here with open deck lists, you have a little bit more information, and that tends to complicate things a little bit. So we do head back to the match between these two players. Dominic Harvey, of course, the higher seed, got to be on the play. Very powerful in Magic at large, but even more so when you're able to have a deck that can take a little bit more of a tempo role, right? Laying the beatdowns. I say tempo role as we play a tap land on turn 1 in the form of Restless Reef. Not exactly the best tempo play, I'd argue.
Yeah, not the greatest tempo play, but you know what? You got to have that mana working. And Restless Reef, we've seen in some of these other matchups, is an all-star card. So I know some players they hate the idea of playing these tap lands in this deck, but you've got to have the creature land at least in some numbers.
So big. What are you supposed to do? Fabled Passage defines forest. We're going to go ahead and analyze the pollen, I believe.
Yeah, we pollen into Bushwhack.
Sure. Pollen into Bushwhacks. This is one way to do it. Reminds me of the Attune with Aether days. Here you go. Lay of the land. Over and over again. I'm playing with all basics. No blood moons here. Dom, all that fanciness. All right. Thanks for sharing. Island go.
Dom has negate in hand. That makes me think that the duress thing we talked about before might also be there. Could be that Dom likes, being able to punish mana that's tapped down and spent here, but did bring in that. So it might be kind of a big play here if this game goes a certain way.
Can't tag Enduring Vitality, which is the play here on curve for Wesley Hickman. Now, Dom did a great job using counterspells, things like Spell Stutter previously to take care of that. Not clear. It looks like he has an Anoint. That's something you called out as being a nice answer to Vitality.
Yeah, I think Dom has Anoint here, but also only has 3 lands. So I think he's thinking, do I need to get pressure going? Because like we mentioned, Dom does he can go long in this matchup, but he can't go crazy long. And so figuring out, he also has Spell Stutter Drake.
Wow, he's trying all. Yeah.
I think he's trying to figure out how do I want these things to line up, right? Because Anoint is good here, but it could also hit Valley Floodcaller. But maybe I'm not going to get a chance to use my conditional counterspell later.
Yeah, I guess that's the conclusion he reached as well. Does go ahead and fire off the Spell Stutter. The Vitality goes to the yard. Does find a land. I think that was a big one for him. I didn't necessarily see a land. Oh, he does have one, yeah, because he has a swamp as well. So plenty of lands, but still no pressure. Really the only piece missing for Dom. Plenty of removal, interaction, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Back to Wesley go, his turn 4.
Wesley started to play a Fabled Passage and stopped. It does look like I have a Copperline Gorge in hand. So it could be a spot there where Wesley originally was like, I'm going to play this 4-drop, and now maybe considering, well, do I need 5 mana on the next turn? Sequencing matters a lot with this Temur Floodcaller deck.
As a backup Vitality, and of course we know Dom has an answer to that, but it should be pretty good for Wesley. His backup Enduring Vitality, part of the combo for sure. And again, we know Dom has a bunch of interaction, but as you called out, he really needs to get some pressure going. I don't see a ton of creatures in his hand.
Yeah, and we're going to see a very cool interaction here, Drake. So this is maybe why I could have anointed last turn. We're going to torch the tower, but we're going to pay bargain, which means we need to sacrifice it. So now it comes back and doesn't get exiled from either of the cards exiling. So very played there by Wesley, playing around Anoint, and now we'll have this deer in play for probably the remainder of the game.
Yeah, very much harder for Dom to answer enchantment. So a little bit of a trickery there. Of course, you would imagine torch the tower. Wait, that exiles. No, you're actually paying the bargain. So that's a good call out there as well. It means you get to keep the Vitality, which we knew Dom has a ton of answers to. And here we go. Tidebinder your Fabled Passage. Oh, you thought you're in standard? You get to escape stifling fetch lands? No, you do not. Go ahead and blow up that land. Thank you. And
Dom's like
Fabled Passage this turn. Yeah, we don't get to play another land just because I stopped it doesn't mean you get another one.
Well, that's terrible news for Dom. Because the news is it didn't bother Wesley, right? The fact that
lands abound.
Yeah, he just doesn't care. So Dom's like, no.
Whatever, man. You got it. Thanks for not hitting my Floodcaller, which does come down on end step. He does have some Valley Floodcaller action here. And Dom says, yeah, that's fine. Back over to Wesley we go. Tashun Sidebinder now applying some pressure, but Wesley has kind of some of the combo going here. We got a enchantment version of Enduring Vitality and a Floodcaller. Another passage being cracked. A
I
lot of
love
mana.
Wesley looked at Dom like, is it okay? And I can only imagine in Dom's mind, like, bro, I saw you trying to play a different land. I'm not going to stifle even if I had
Yeah. And here we go. Offspring, a Thunder Trap Trainer.
Yeah, and that's going to let us get 2 looks at the top 4 cards of our deck here. It is something that I believe can be Tashani Tidebinder if we had it, but Dom does not have it here.
No, I already used that one in the Fabled Passage, and I think the first one finds Bushwhack. It looks like the second one, yeah, we got options.
Scorching Dragonfire is definitely one of the cards. I'm not sure exactly which one. That one we talked about before, you can fight over the board here. And we're seeing also the difference between Dom having these early flash creatures, Nickel and Diamond Wesley, and not, right? The fact that we were on the draw, we weren't able to develop something like even a Spyglass Iron on the first turn means even if Wesley, fades for a couple turns, it's not the end of the world, right? We can still
he's had Kaido since the opening turns, and he doesn't feel like he can deploy it, right? He has all this interaction he needs to line up. So that's part of the equation as well. You'd love to get some of this other stuff going, but you really just haven't had the time. He might now, as here comes here. You just called all that out. Well, here comes 2 creatures, Fairy Mastermind and the Flood Pit's Drowner. That's going to add a lot more pressure to this board, provided it can get through the Thunder Trap Trainer and its offspring.
Yep. Remember, all of these creatures also represent 1 mana once they've lost Summoning Sickness here. So in the coming turns, this is a lot of mana available for Wesley. So picking up that room there might look like a kind of clunky card. Not really the end of the world.
Yeah, and they can represent even more, right? Because we're talking about Valley Flood Caller triggers, and these things are going to get untapped as they're otters. So you could they represent a ton of mana, and what is more or less the modern day version of it. Reminds me of Jeskai Ascendancy, where you cast spells. That's really how you blow the doors off of using mana. Is this card just keeps untapping your mana creatures over and over again? Kind of the impression that we've assembled here.
Interesting play there. The Dom could have Flood Pit Drowner the Valley Flood Caller and then shuffled it away as a way to just remove that untap engine. I wonder if Dom has a read that maybe Wesley has multiple, because I don't see a kill spell in hand for the Valley Flood Caller, which would be the number one reason not to remove it.
Gates and a Kaido. Okay, yeah. Yeah, maybe that's something he does want to get rid of, but maybe he just feels very safe with 2 negates. I can only imagine that's what's going on.
Yeah. Well, Dom's definitely attacking with this Fairy Mastermind. It doesn't do anything else. The real question is anyone else getting into the red zone?
Well, Thunder Trap Trainer is only a 1/2, right? So we can attack with the Tidebinder pretty safely, provided there's no spells. Yeah, it's summoning 6, so we can't do anything tricky with that.
I guess Dom might be worried a bit about getting cracked backed on, because remember, they get, like you mentioned, Jeskai Ascendancy, they get the +1/+1 as well. So there is maybe a world where Dom's afraid of well, you have a couple otters. Maybe I just die if I make this attack. And maybe, or I get to a spot where I'm not dead, quote unquote, but I am in a very awkward position.
Yeah, I think this is pretty conservative here, as he does go ahead and ninjutsu the Kaido, bringing back the flash creature, which leaves up 2 mana. Obviously can redeploy that one if he has the time, but we know about negates. Wesley doesn't necessarily, but has to know something's up.
Yeah, and Dom decides to put the stun counters on it now via the Kaido, and then activate the Flood Pit Drowner in order to shuffle it away. So I guess Dom was leaving himself open to the possibility of top decking a removal spell there, letting him save the pressure and that Drowner for maybe later in the game.
And super heads up too, we still have the Tidebinder up to block and defend Kaido, which is now at low loyalty as well. So nice little tricks there. Like I said, a little bit conservative. Makes me think that Dom, not really doesn't feel the pressure to get the game over with necessarily, and can try to fight on the card advantage axis, do some removing, and kind of keep interacting more so than trying to beat down, as we do head back to Wesley, who, like I said, still has a lot of life, but a lot of problems as well. Here we go. Roaring Furnace, Steaming Sauna. So it looks like we are going to make the Roaring Furnace and deploy a backup Enduring Vitality. So, here we go. Everybody can read that. When you unlock this door, this room deals damage equal to the number of cards in your hand to target creature an opponent controls. That, of course, picked off the Tidebinder. And then when you unlock the other side, you have to do a maximum hand size at the beginning of your except you draw cards. Nice little extra value there that you can get out of your removal spell. This deck actually plays 2 copies in the main deck of that one.
This is also a great one to pick up with This Town Ain't Big Enough. That's a repeatable, sort of kill spell. So if you start flooding out, it draws you a lot of cards. If you need to have a bunch of removal spells, you can buy a lot of time, bouncing the heavy mana cards, answering the backup threat, and just sort of looping that a couple times with your Storm Chaser's talent, which Wesley hasn't seen. Wesley's deck, is a Storm Chaser's talent deck. We've talked a little bit about this card over the course of the weekend and just how powerful it is in these kind of interactive games. And Wesley cannot find it. And these games look very different when you have it versus when you don't.
Yeah, like you mentioned, there's 4 copies of the deck. We haven't seen one in either game thus far. So that's not ideal, I think, if you ask Wesley. But, I mean, he's done a good job with what he's had this game. A lot of looks, too. I mean, got the double Thunder Trap trainer off and really still feels like a kind of a repeat of game 1 for the most part. A lot of flooding out, a little bit of a better board. We actually got to keep our Enduring Vitalities, but still can't slam the door in the game quite yet.
I'm a little unsure of what's happening here, just transparently. It looks like we're in Dom's upkeep.
Yeah, I believe so as well. And I don't think we have any mana.
I don't think we do. Oh, the Kaito is attacking. I see.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm attacking. Okay, that makes
Yeah.
more sense. So he was deciding, do I want to block with this Enduring Vitality, or do I want to have it as an attacker / mana producer? That's why we were tanking. This makes a lot more sense. Dom just sort of left it there. Makes sense. Even though Dom, a veteran of coverage, should know better from me, but
just dogging on him.
It's his birthday, and I'll give him that one. If it happens again, I will issue a warning. So,
will you? Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know you had that.
It's a coverage warning. It doesn't really do anything, but Twitch chat will sometimes get mad at one of us. I just hope it's not me.
So we're surveilling 2 right now, and Dom is in the. It looks like a land and a Tidebinder. It looks like he kept both. All right. So we've deployed the Soulstone Sanctuaries. This is a creature land. It's a 3/3. You can get Vigilance and all creature types.
Powerful with the Kaito plus, for it is both a ninja and a boar.
Okay. Great.
That's what they pay me for.
Yeah, sure. Well, here comes a little bit of mopey crackbacks. I mean, a lot of game objects, not a lot of points of power is Wesley assembled. Now, of course, that can change very quickly with things like Valley Flood Collar, but that is not present at the moment. So here comes some beatdowns on the Kaido. Going to get that one off the board. Presumably, I don't know. I assume we attack with more than just one creature because obviously there's plenty of tricks Dom can have. Looks like we might have just sent them all and unlocked the Steaming Sauna, which somehow your sauna enlightens you with knowledge. You have no maximum hand size. And we're going to draw a card on Instep, Monarch-esque. Going to animate the creature into a 3/3 and untap.
Drake, have you been to a sauna? It's very refreshing. You get some new ideas. You should really try
refreshing. It. Yeah. Game-wise, I feel like I gain life. I don't know that I feel like I learn things. I draw cards and have no maximum hand size. I don't know. All the things that... Well,
I don't know. We should go to the sauna and hang out. Well, then we'll make it happen.
Yeah, okay. We'll have to talk to Norm. He'll get us sponsored, a little sauna day. I'm in. Well, for those of us not in the sauna, more or less, that's Dom and Wesley here. We're back to Dom's turn. Has the 3/3, has assembled Fairy Mastermind. Looks like he has Kaido to work with as well. And I believe he drew the Tidebinder now. So that one he left on top from the Kaido 0 previously. A lot of resources to work with, and now the hard decisions start.
Yep. And this is what we talked about. This is the start of the game where it's very soon going to maybe start slipping away from Dom, right? Wesley's drawing a lot of lands, having a little bit of unfortunateness when it comes to that. But Dom has been able to kind of keep up, apply a decent amount of pressure to Wesley. We finally got that going. We need to start kind of closing the door before Wesley starts doing very powerful stuff. And you're seeing Dom sort of ride the line here of like, do I attack with this and ninjutsu? Do I, maybe just keep it on the battlefield and hold up all my counter magic? Do I play my Kaito and plus so my Soulstone can be bigger? A lot of options available here for Dom.
Yeah, a lot of options, and weirdly, I feel like he has a lot of mana to work with. 5 lands, just deployed land 6, which unfortunately enters tap, but still feels like he doesn't have enough. Still feels like he has more mana than he really needs to spend it all. He needs more mana to spend all of his mana the way he wants to, and has to kind of make some decisions about what to prioritize and what he feels like he can beat. And appears to have done that. 2 mana here on end step, and there's a little bit of This Town Ain't Big Enough.
Dom saying, bro, I promise the town's big enough. Don't do it.
Negate that. Yeah, the town is definitely big enough, says Dom. And those negates he's been holding on to for a while. Gonna find a key spell. Storm Chaser's talent to pick up.
Yeah, that is a card that matters. We've been talking about it this whole time, and the Up the Beanstalk plus Storm Chasers plus This Town Ain't Big Enough is sort of that engine that we see go off. We have some pretty good cards in our graveyard. We don't have the Up the Beanstalk to go crazy, but Wesley might be able to make some really big things happen here. Now, Dom obviously does have that Tashana's Tidebinder, which you can use in order to stop the leveling up of Storm Chasers talent to class level 2. That would be a very powerful thing to do here. Dom can also negate it. As we know, Dom has that in hand. So some options available here for Dom about how he wants to move forward, and does decide to negate it.
Yeah, says no thanks. Negates that one as well. So the negates he's been holding up for a long time finally get used. And I think that's going to be some pressure off Dom as far as needing to hold up mana. But we're going to go ahead and bushwhack, have a creature fight another creature. So that's going to mean that Vitality is going to fight the Mastermind, gets to stick around afterwards, and attack with Vigilance.
Yep. I think we're also seeing here a moment where some players, like one of the strengths I should say of this Team of Flood Color deck is it's very weird, right? It plays a lot of different games and can do a lot of different things. Dom understands those very well, right? And the reason Dom's tanking so much is because he knows what's available and he's trying to pick the fights he can actually win, and knows that if that talent hit the board, yes, I could Tidebinder the level up, but then it's still on the board. It's something I have to fight over the rest of the game. So as much as I want to get this Tidebinder and get the pressure going, I need to fight this fight now so that later I can fight the fights I actually need to fight over.
Is this Reef time? Is 4 mana? No, it's got to be Kaido time. Yeah, okay. It's just normal Kaido time. I was like, 4 mana, not a lot of plays there. Shield Druid among the best. Kaido, non-ninjutsu. Tough way to do it. Don't want to pick your land up, though, as we're just fumbling with the dice. Tapping the Enduring Vitality, as you mentioned, represents a mana. Of course, the effect we already have via an enchantment version over there, but just kind of the biggest attacker, biggest blocker. And down one stun counter, back to Wesley. A lot of mana to work with. His spells have not worked as of late, but the pressure mostly off for the moment. So Wesley got a little bit of time, and we get to collect evidence 8 on this Analyze the Pollen. Here we go. So we're going to search for a creature or a land card instead of just a basic land. So we have upgraded, as Dom's going to see what evidence was collected. Really building a case file here.
Dom, I was not there that day. I was with my good friend from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Yeah. The town is in fact big enough. I already told you. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll see what Wesley learns from the pollen. He's not sure. He's really struggling. This is like the CSI montage where they're like clicking through enhance.
So there's a lot of pretty good cards here, right? We could get Thundertrap Trainer. That's a good way to just try and get a couple cards in hand and play the value game. We can try and get, the Flood Caller, excuse me. We're going with Questing Druid sort of as a way to get a couple cards up front for a little bit cheaper and have a kind of a big body. I kind of like the idea of this. Like, this game's going to be going for a bit. Let me get my cards right now and just use all this mana, which is something I am flush on.
Yeah, I mean, just more card draw, great spot, and you get a pretty big attackers. This game has really been about the board, as you kind of mentioned it would be. And here we go. We found a Lithomantic Barrage. So that's maybe a little awkward, but not awful. Can we target that? Yeah, there we go. Creature or Planeswalker can do that on our turn. If that target is white or blue, we get 5. So that actually will clean up the Kaido if it resolves. Can be countered too, so it's pretty likely to resolve. I don't know if there's any exile spells or any Sink into Stupor style shenanigans here.
I don't think Dom has anything that can interact.
We seem to be thinking about something.
I think we're Tidebindering the Questing Druid trigger. Yeah, that way this doesn't grow and it loses its ability.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that way we don't get outclassed on the battlefield.
Love that. Love it from Dom. Really respecting that this game is about the board and everything going on the board. And Tidebinder's turning that down and drew another Kaido.
That's a good one.
Not interested. Here we go. Animates the Reef very quickly.
Might be interested, though. You can still ninjutsu.
10? True. Yeah, the land has vigilance. We can do some combat tricks.
Love this from Dom. Targeting ourselves. Remember, Wesley is a talent deck, so putting cards in the graveyard is something we can then buy back. Also, we can analyze the pollen again. Heads up play there. Little things like this do matter a lot.
Yeah, he's already collected evidence 8, and I don't even know that he could again if he drew one. So that could come up huge as Wesley in the tank for the blocks. Like I said, an attack for 10 here has to do some blocking. Looks like we're doing a lot of blocking. Tidebinder trades. Wesley's board cleaned up quite a bit. Some lands, the leftovers you mentioned early in the game. I was kind of making fun of Restless Reef. Now, here we go. 2 creature lands attacking, representing a lot of Dom's attack force.
Yeah, and you see Dom there too, really valuing having this reef up already, has the Kaito in hand, and knows that it can still be a great surprise just by tapping down 2 things.
Here comes another Bushwhack, which is going to kill the other Vitality, and that is going to make it into another enchantment. So all of Wesley's oh wow, he's just animate reef and attack. I'm saying his entire board's gone. He's just dead. And yeah, he is just dead. No tricks. Wow.
Yeah, this is sort of, we talked about it, right? The reef gives you a lot of game when you go long, and that's how that game was starting to go, right? If Dom didn't have that Restless Reef anymore, we might have seen, extra cards every couple turns, take over, but it pushed the last couple points of damage, and why those chip shots matter so much in this matchup.
Yeah, incredible too. I mean, you can kind of tell the story about the flood out that happened, flood caller too. Wow, that's tough. The flood caller deck flooding, but a lot of flood out there from Wesley. I mean, had a sauna going, and like through all of it, Dom still looks more or less to be in a commanding position the entire game. Even when his board was gone, he still had plenty of resources to work with. Really speaks to the power of the mid-range deck, and particularly to how little mana it needs to go off. It felt like there was a lot of spots there where Wesley was only a little bit away from winning, but had a lot already going his way, and then really couldn't close the door in the game. Dom ultimately with his Dimir mid-range deck, a convincing victory to pair with Theo's convincing victory. Our number 1 and 2 seeds both dominating their way into the top 4.
Yeah, our number 1 and 2 seeds, and personally, my number 1 and 2 pick when it comes to win this tournament, right? We've been talking about it a lot this weekend. These are 2 players who are kind of at the top of their game right now, right? Dom top 8 at a Pro Tour just a couple years ago, played all the last couple Pro Tours, played Worlds, right? Theo in a very similar position, minus the top 8, already qualified for the Pro Tour in Chicago that's coming up here soon. So these players are sort of the players. We obviously have a lot of very strong players in our field. Andrew Ellenbogen is a Pro Tour champion, right? Steven Dykeman's our champion from last year, but these 2 players were sort of where a lot of people I think were like, hey, these are kind of like the people I want to pick in my fantasy draft, right? And they're really making sure that like it was the right pick. And I think back to when Dom won, Drake. Dev and I commentated that tournament, and he said, I'm going to be your player of the year, and I'm going to win champs. I'm just going to do it. It's already happened. It's locked up now that I'm in. And he really wants to make that true and get that 3rd NRG trophy, and the one that matters.
The entire time I've been around the Canadians, they've always been talking smack about the tournament series here in the States and how soft and easy they are. Well, it's time to prove it, and Dom is doing a great job of that so far. And like I said, punched a convincing victory ticket to the top 4, where as the number 2 seed, gonna be in a good position here for the rest of the tournament, all the way to the finals. Theo, of course, the only player above him that can really get the play over him. So that's a great spot. Seeding matters a ton, obviously, for a host of reasons, including picking the formats. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out alongside the rest of the top 8.
Speaking of the rest of the top 8, those players are in their game number 3s right now of their deciding games. So we're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to have more Magic in just a couple minutes. See you soon.